Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, fantasy freaks and geeks? Welcome to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. This is part 2 of the Week 1 preview. Got some wild stuff going on already. We got star receivers in Oakland, Cleveland, Atlanta, all possibly at risk of missing Week 1. Suspensions, holdout, injuries. I don't know what's going on here, man. We are going to take a look at all 15 games for the rest of the week here. We already saw the first game of the season last night, Packers at the Bears. As can be expected, it was a pretty sloppy game offensively, but the defenses, they sure did show up. We're going to start with the AFC home games. Then I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to drop in Chris Navarra's 3-team parlay of the week. I'm going to put down $25 a week, see if at the end of the season, if he made me some money or if he lost me some money. Be a little fun thing. We work together, so we like to, talk about football whenever we can, really. And then I'm going to come back and do all the NFC home games. So let's get started here with the Buffalo Bills going to play the New York Jets. Obviously, probably the guy that's getting the most attention in this game is Le'Veon Bell. It's the first time we're going to see him play in well over a year. Obviously, these two quarterbacks are going to be playing each other a lot, if all things go to plan. With these two teams, two guys drafted in the same year, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen. I'm pretty excited about Sam Darnold as a Jets fan. I think Adam Gase is going to be good for him. I think all this talent that they brought on is going to be good for this second-year quarterback here. But back to this running back and the running backs in this game. Le'Veon Bell, Devin Singletary, Ty Montgomery, all have, different situations here. Obviously, Devin Singletary should expect a lot more touches than maybe we were thinking he would about a week and a half ago when a lot of people probably were drafting. But with no LaShawn McCoy there, it means a majority of those touches are going to be going to Devin Singletary. Obviously, Frank Gore is going to be taking some of them as well. TJ Yeldon is going to catch some passes out of the backfield, but Devin Singletary, I think, is now, after this cut of McCoy, he's the number one guy there, so he's definitely worth playing. Le'Veon Bell, he is obviously worth playing. He's a top dog, but I wouldn't get too excited about him. I think the Jets are going to ease him in. Over the past 5 seasons, he's averaged 246 carries and 62 receptions. Plus, he had another 94 touches in total of the 16 and 17 playoffs. That's a lot of touches in 5 years. I know he had a year off, but I think they're going to try and ease him in, make sure he's all good. Again, he probably hasn't gotten legitly hit in well over a year. So I think Ty Montgomery should see plenty of snaps as well. He's shown plenty of versatility in this league, so I think the coaching staff would feel fine about putting him in and being able to call the same plays that they would if Le'Veon was out there. So I think he's worth playing as well. And then the other guy I'm very excited about as a Jets fan and as a fantasy player is Jamison Crowder, especially in PPR leagues. Slot receivers last year with Adam Gase in his offense, they caught a ton of passes. And Jameson Crowder is going to step right into that role. I also think Quincy Enunwa might play a little bit on the inside. We'll have to see whether or not Robbie Anderson's going to suit up and play for this game. I'm staying away from Anderson. I want to see what Quincy's role is going to be like in this offense. I have a feeling that with Chris Herndon out for the first 4 weeks, we might see Quincy play more of a tight end role than a wide receiver. So kind of want to see what's going to go on there before I start any of those guys. Other players to note, obviously, with the Bills, they got some new wide receivers this offseason, Cole Beasley, John Brown. I don't think I'm willing to play either one of them. I want to see what this offense looks like. Last year, it was pretty bad in the air, at least. They brought on some new guys, though, so we'll have to wait and see if any of these guys are worth rostering and even whether they're worth playing at all. Last year, the Jets did allow the second fewest receptions to running backs, so I wouldn't get my hopes up as far as Devin Singletary, having a big amount of, high amount of catches, for you PPR players out there, and especially now with C.J. Mosley on the team, I think that's going to be even harder for him. So, if you can, maybe if you have other players in a PPR league that maybe have some more upside in the pass game at the running back position, you might want to think about that. Moving on to our next game here, we got the Steelers going out to New England. Big Ben is notoriously horrible on the road. I'm staying away from him for sure. If you drafted Tom Brady, you're probably playing him. These running backs, we got James Conner coming off of that big season last year. He's somebody that you drafted with your first or second pick. You're playing him. And these running backs with the Patriots, it's going to be a weird split between both of them all season. Sonny Michel is definitely more valuable in standard leagues, and James White is definitely more valuable in PPR leagues because they both have such a defined role on the team. But I think you can play both of them in either format because this offense is good enough where both of these running backs are going to get you some points. As far as the daily fantasy stuff goes, I would play Jalen Samuels. I'm sure he's pretty cheap. Last year he had 328 total yards in the 3 games that he played without James Conner. So, if a cheap guy in DFS that maybe you can throw in your lineup and he catches a couple passes, I think he's going to be some kind of, H-back / kind of like what you see with Kyle Juszczyk out there in San Francisco. I think the Steelers are going to scheme up some stuff for him. I've said it numerous times. I think I've said it on every one of the season preview episodes leading up to this season, how many targets need to be replaced in Pittsburgh this year with Antonio Brown leaving and Jesse James leaving. Got almost 200 targets to replace. So another guy that I think is going to benefit from those targets, and you need to go somewhere. I think it's going to be Vance McDonald. I think he's in line to take on pretty much all of the targets that Jesse James left behind, which was about 40. And even if he only gets 25 of them, that should push him to right around the 100 target mark, where you really want to be for one of these top or middle tier tight ends, especially in PPR leagues. So I'm excited about Vance McDonald. I'm excited about Jalen Samuels in PPR formats, in the DFS formats for sure. And then obviously Juju Smith-Schuster, another guy you drafted with your first 2 picks. You're playing him. You play your studs. Same goes with Julian Edelman. The one guy on the Patriots that I'm waiting on, Josh Gordon. The first draft I did of the season, I was able to get Josh Gordon with the last pick, and that league has an IR slot. So as soon as the draft was over, I threw him in my IR slot, and I picked up another player. It was like having a extra bench spot. It's been great, and I'm waiting to see, whether or not he's even going to have a role on this team, whether he's going to, be a red zone threat. What's going to happen with this guy? They brought on another older wide receiver, Demaryius Thomas. They got Philip Dorsett still there, so it's going to be another mismatch of wide receiver 2 there. They got to replace all the production that Gronk has left behind and the way that they run their offense. So you got to expect these receivers are going to have to play a bigger role in this offense this year. But I want to see what Josh Gordon looks like before I throw him into one of my lineups. Moving on to our next game here, we got the Baltimore Ravens playing at the Miami Dolphins, which, in my opinion, should be a bloodbath on the favor of the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson's just going to rip them up. They're building something really special here in Baltimore, I think. They bring on Mark Ingram, who to me just epitomizes what a Ravens running back should look like. Lamar Jackson, the joystick, Michael Vick 2.0 possibly. you got to spy them if you're, a defensive coordinator. This offense keeps getting harder and harder to defend, especially after they bring on Marquise Brown in the draft. You got a speedster, you got a battering ram at running back, and you got a dual threat quarterback. It's a lot of things to cover, and I'm excited about this offense. So, like I said, I'm playing Mark Ingram, I'm playing Lamar Jackson. Marquise Brown's probably more of a DFS play to me. All he needs to do is catch one of those bombs, and he's good. I'm really hoping that he's not just another Deshaun Jackson where he just runs go routes, and he's a complete boom or bust player. I hope he can actually turn into a legitimate threat, can run the entire route tree and whatnot. Last year, with Lamar Jackson, tight ends were targeted 27% of his 158 pass attempts, and that was in 10 games as a starter. So, if they're gonna try and get him closer to, let's say, 400 pass attempts, which I think is very doable, you got to expect that tight end group's going to see at least 100 of them. The problem is they just have so many good ones that you just don't know who to play. You got Mark Andrews, who had a pretty good season with them last year. Hayden Hurst was a first-round pick, and then Nick Boyle also had some good production for this team as well. So I don't know which one to play. I might give it a couple weeks before I consider picking any of them up, because I have a feeling pretty much all these guys are going to be available on the waiver wire. They may be the perfect bye-week replacements for your Zach Ertz and your George Kittles and those guys. As far as the Dolphins go, I want nothing to do with playing any of these guys. They traded away Kenny Stills, who was their only threat at wide receiver. They're left with the conundrum of Devontae Parker, who has been probably one of the most annoying players, definitely for the Dolphins. They bring on Alan Hearns, and they still got Albert Wilson from last year, Jakeem Grant, but there's no playmakers there at all. They bring on Ryan Fitzpatrick, who joins his 10th team of his career. I could maybe see playing Kenyon Drake in a DFS league. Maybe in a full point PPR league, just because he's probably going to catch 6-7 passes in garbage time alone. But I'm definitely trying to stay away from the Dolphins if I can in this one. Moving on to our next game, we got the Titans playing at the Browns. I'll tell you what, I'm staying away from all of the Titans as well. Now, the Titans had a pretty good defense last year, but I think the Browns' defense this year is going to be pretty special. That defensive line, I think, is going to destroy teams. Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon, Myles Garrett. That's a pretty good set of three guys up there at the front. They got a pretty good set of linebackers as well. Joe Schubert, Kirksey. They got some good players there, and I'm not playing any of these Titans. If you remember from last year, the headache that was trying to figure out the Titans' run game. Derrick Henry was probably the MVP of fantasy football last year. Anybody that was lucky enough to pick him up right before the playoffs started, anybody that was able to keep him on your bench and not have to rely on him throughout the season. But I'm staying away from all the Titans. Maybe Delaney Walker if he's a tight end, and you got a bunch of teams in your league that have two tight ends on their team, and the waiver wire is really thin or whatever. But I'm staying away from all their main players. Obviously, with the Browns, you're going to play Nick Chubb, Odell, Jarvis, Njoku, Baker. You're going to play them all. I mean, like I said, the Titans did have a pretty good defense last year. They gave up the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, the 4th fewest to running backs. They allowed actually the fewest points to tight ends. But I mean, it's just this offense just looks to be one of the more explosive offenses in the league. They're just loaded with talent at every spot. If you have these guys, you're playing them. Doesn't matter the matchup. Moving on. Actually, one more thing about that game. Odell Beckham is apparently dealing with a hip injury. He said something about comparing his situation to a sports car that's out of alignment or something ridiculous. I would be prepared to play somebody else in his spot There's just been so many games. As a Jets fan, I'm pretty tuned into the New York sports talk, at least for sure. And, the guy would always randomly miss games because of dehydration and this and that. So I would be prepared to have somebody fill into his spot. Maybe go into the day with him locked into a flex position instead of one of your wide receiver spots. That way, if you do have to switch him out, you have more options as to who you can replace him with. And with Jarvis Landry, his target share last year was obviously the highest on the team, as it should have been. He was the best wide receiver on the team. But now with Odell there, I really think his targets are going to go down significantly. And for a guy that has been throughout his entire career a 5 or 6 yards a catch guy, where he just runs these little slot routes in betweens and whatnot, never really pushes the ball down the field. I think he may see a little downtick in his numbers throughout the season. But like I said, on an offense that's this talented, you want as many parts of it as you can. So you're playing Jarvis Landry if you have him. Moving on to the next game, we got the Colts playing at the Chargers. The Colts dealing with the untimely retirement of Andrew Luck. Pour one out for them. They go into this game with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Everything from them has been how confident they are in this guy and how he can come in and play. If there's a guy that can relate to that, it's their head coach, Frank Reich. He's been there before. He's done that. The problem is the effect on everybody else that it has. Obviously now T.Y. Hilton is not as valuable of a wide receiver as he was. These tight ends that last year were, at least Eric Ebron was fantastic, caught a ridiculous amount of touchdowns. Obviously his numbers have to go down now with Jacoby Brissett. There's no way he steps in and puts up the same numbers that Andrew Luck put up last year. A lot of these wide receivers that I was pretty excited about in the summer, I'm kind of not necessarily down on, but I'm definitely not interested in anymore. Guys like Paris Campbell, Zach Pascal, Chester Rogers, they bring on Devin Funchess. I was excited about him, being a number 2 guy next to T.Y., and, the excitement's kind of gone on him as well. One guy that could possibly see an uptick in this situation is Nyheim Hines. Obviously, he catches a lot of passes out of the backfield. He's more involved on those third down plays. So, maybe if the Colts find themselves in more game scripts where they're down, you might see Nyheim Hines have a higher snap count than he did last year, or maybe than what the team was hoping for him to have going into this year. But I'd still play Marlon Mack. I'd still play T.Y. Hilton. The Chargers did allow the 10th most fantasy points to running backs last year, so it's not a bad matchup at all. They allowed the most receiving yards to running backs as well, so that another uptick for Nyheim Hines, maybe another guy you want to throw into your DFS lineup because he does have a good matchup. He's got some upside. He's got the situation to be catching passes, and he's probably pretty cheap. So, you know what? I'm actually going to go over and I'm going to put a star next to him so I don't forget about that. Moving over to the Chargers. Phillip Rivers. I love Phillip Rivers. I got him in 2 of my leagues. I was trying to get him in a third and I missed out on him. I'm actually in talks to trade for him. I'd love to get him. But he's got to be one of the more safer quarterbacks in fantasy football every year. He's up there in the top 10, top 12. With Melvin Gordon still holding out, you got to figure that Phillip's going to be throwing a little bit more than he did last year, or that they were thinking he would. Wow, that was a tough one. Austin Eckler last year, he started 3 of the 4 games without Melvin Gordon, and he averaged 17 touches a game. That's a great opportunity. A guy that you probably got in the 6th round, maybe 5th, maybe 7th. He's worth playing for sure. So I'm playing him. I'm playing Keenan Allen. I'm playing Mike Williams, this pair of wide receivers. I think Mike Williams, he's definitely not going to catch as many touchdowns as he did last year, but I think he's still going to put up some numbers. And another guy that I'm very excited about, Hunter Henry, he's finally getting on the field. I got him in a full point PPR. I'm excited about him. I think he's going to be a red zone threat, especially without Melvin Gordon there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Keenan Allen because I know that he's had some injury stuff throughout the training camp and whatnot. So I'm hoping that he's all good. He's a fun player to watch. Going to one of the more fun games to look forward to this week is the Chiefs and the Jaguars. Last year we saw these two teams play, and it was a great game. Should be one of the best offenses versus one of the best defenses all season. So Mahomes, you're playing him. Doesn't matter how great this Jacksonville defense is. As far as the running backs go, Damian Williams, yeah, I know they just brought on LaShawn McCoy, and some people were excited about Darwin Thomas, but Damian Williams, in his 5 starts without Hunt last year, he averaged 114.4 total yards, and he scored 8 touchdowns, and that's in 5 games. So I'm playing him no matter what the matchup is. In this offense, with the talent around him, he will never see a stacked box. He's in line to have a pretty good year this year, so I'm playing him. I'm playing Tyreek Hill. I don't care that he's getting matched up with oh man, this sucks. Cornerback on the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's a big loudmouth, and he's a very good corner. But yeah, you don't sit guys like Tyreek Hill who have that kind of explosion, that kind of big playability. And obviously Travis Kelce, you're playing him too. When the Chiefs put that speed on the outside on both sides now with Mecole Hardman, I think Travis Kelce is going to just destroy teams this year. He's going to eat the middle of the field all season long. On the Jaguars side, I think the only guy I'm really looking to play this week is Leonard Fournette. He's a stud. You play your studs. He's going to get 20 carries. With T.J. Yeldon not there, I think he's going to see even more targets than he saw last year. With the wide receivers on this team, D.D. Westbrook, Marquise Lee, Keelan Cole, DJ Shark, Chris Conley. There's no number 1 receiver, but it seems like they have a whole bunch of guys that are good enough to be number 2 receivers. So, we'll see who emerges from that pool of Jaguar wide receivers this year for Nick Foles. Going here to our last AFC home game, we got the Broncos at the Raiders. We got a rookie running back with the Raiders, Josh Jacobs. I'm playing him. I know that the Broncos have a pretty good defense. They actually allowed the 10th fewest receptions to running back, so I don't expect him to be catching too many passes in this game. On the other hand, the Raiders were pretty generous to running backs last year. The 7th most fantasy points to running backs. So Phillip Lindsay is worth a start. I would stay away from Royce Freeman until we see what their split is going to be like. And then another guy on the Broncos I'm excited about is Courtland Sutton. Definitely in DFS. I think he's worth a play. He only caught 50% of his targets last year, and a lot of the targets that he got were, deep throws. They were, not easy passes to catch. And I think Joe Flacco is a much more accurate deep ball thrower than who Courtland Sutton was playing with last year. So I'm excited about Courtland Sutton. I want to see what happens with him and Manny Sanders coming off of an Achilles tear. He played the one game in the preseason and he actually looked pretty damn good. So it's gonna be exciting to see what this Broncos offense can evolve into with Joe Flacco there. Kind of weird saying it, but I think he may be pretty good out there. I'm not saying I want to add him to my fantasy team, but I think he could bring some value to these Broncos wide receivers, Deshaun Hamilton included. On the Raiders side, obviously Antonio Brown's situation, he's just been a pain in the ass since the minute he got there, I'm sure. He's first dealing with the frostbite, then he's dealing with the helmet issue, and now we apparently got into an argument with the GM, and he's, ranting and raving about whatever, and then he comes on and, apologizes in front of the team, and, the Raiders go from saying that they might be suspending him and looking into voiding his contract and all kinds of crazy stuff into now, oh, no, he's still going to play. It's all good. So, I don't know what's going on there. Again, be prepared to switch him out with somebody in case, he blows up again, just wakes up Sunday morning and decides, he wants to be a diva. So If he doesn't play, I think that's going to open up huge opportunity for all kinds of dudes on this Raiders team. I mean, even if he does play, guys like Tyrell Williams, I know he's spent his entire career playing on the other side of a number one receiver in San Diego, now Los Angeles. And Hunter Renfrow is a guy that I don't watch college football anywhere near as much as other football guys do. But I remember watching these games with Hunter Renfrow and just seeing how good of a route he runs. I'm excited to see what he turns into for sure. And if Antonio Brown's not playing, he's definitely going to get some targets. And another guy is this Darren Waller, tight end on the Raiders. He's had a pretty interesting career. Red zone targets may open up for him if Antonio Brown does not play. It seems like he's going to play now, but anything can happen with this guy. Another guy that should see a big uptick in value would be Jalen Richard. Catching passes out of the backfield. Derek Carr has never been a guy that pushes the ball down the field. If there's a check down that he thinks he's more comfortable with, he's going to take it. So that is the AFC home games here for the Week 1 Part 2 preview. I'm going to take a short break now, grab a new beer. I'm going to drop in the 3-team parlay of the week and come right back. All right, I'm here with my buddy, Chris Navarra. He is a avid football bettor, and last year he actually got me into the whole art of the parlay, won me a couple bucks here and there throughout the week. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have you on this year. This year we're going to be doing a 3-team parlay of the week. So, just give us what your 3 safest bets against the spread, or if you're picking an over or under, and let's get this rolling. So for Week 1, who are the 3 teams you like best?
Well, I've been looking at this, Matt, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to making some money this year. So for Week 1, like I was saying to you earlier, it's a little tough till you get the feel for the league and who's who, but I think I'm zeroed in on 3 good picks for this week. I'm going to start with the first pick, and this is my lock of the week. I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens, and they are a 6.5-point favorite over Miami. I love the Ravens' defense, the whole Lamar Jackson element. I think they're just going to run all over Miami. Stinks out loud. And they're in tank mode anyway.
So you like them by the touchdown this week?
Oh yeah, easy. I think this is an easy win, double-digit win for the Ravens.
All right, I like it.
Yep, and that's my strongest pick for this week. Pick number 2. I'm looking at the line, how it opened. It opened at Tampa Bay -2.5. It's in Tampa Bay. The line is now down to Tampa Bay -1, and when I see a line move that way and that much, I go the other way. So I'm going to go with the Niners getting 1 point. They're going to win the game outright. And welcome back Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh, yeah.
And the Bruce Arians era in Tampa Bay starts off with a big L.
Okay.
And for my third pick, I went back and forth on this one a little bit. But I'm going to go to another mess in the NFL. Probably the biggest mess is the Oakland Raiders. And they opened as a 3-point favorite. And they are currently now a 1-point underdog. And that's significant line movement. Like I said, I go the other way. So I like Denver -1. The whole Antonio Brown, he is going to play. From what I understand, he's not suspended. But that's a circus out there with Gruden and Brown, and they're just a mess.
Yeah.
The team's in Oakland, and they're moving to Las Vegas. Lock in Denver, and the Joe Flacco era in Denver gets underway with a big W. That's the 3 picks. They're my 3 strongest picks this week.
So you like the Broncos because of that 4-point change in the line?
Oh yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's the biggest line movement of the week. You see a team go from a favorite to an underdog, and they're at home. I'm going to play the percentages there, and what they say, the sharp money never lies. I'm going to go with the money.
Now,
the money's moving.
So we're recording this Friday night. if, let's say, Saturday morning it comes out that Antonio Brown is in fact playing, do you expect that line to get back closer to it what it was originally? Are you still going to bet on the Broncos here, or do you not care? Do you think that the situation is just such a crap show that you're willing to just put your money on the Broncos and hope for the best?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, I don't think the line's going to move because as of right now, in the website that I use to get my point spreads, at the bottom of every game, if anybody's questionable or out, like Antonio Brown's not even listed on here. So for me, he's playing. And then I heard on the radio today that he is a go, that he's not suspended.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't expect that to move. And even if it did, yeah, I'm with the Broncos on this. I think they win easy.
Cool. All right, man. Sounds good. Well, put it in the books, and we're going to see if, if as the season goes on, let's say if we bet $25 on each week, well, at the end of the season, we'll see if you're going to be making us money or if you're going to be losing us money. So, again, thank you for coming on the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Can't wait to have you on next week. And let's go Ravens, let's go Broncos, and who was the third team? I forget.
What did you say? Ravens, Broncos, and 49ers.
And 49ers, right. Oh, yeah, Jimmy G, that's right.
That's right.
Cool, man. All right, well, thanks again, bro. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, see you later.
Later. And we are back here with part 2 of the Week 1 preview episode of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. We're going to jump into the NFC home games, starting with the Texans at the Saints. Got a pair of awesome quarterbacks playing. Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, playing both of them. Alvin Kamara, top 5 pick in the draft. Michael Thomas, he's in the first round for sure. He's another guy, another stud you're playing, along with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm playing Jared Cook in this matchup. The Texans last year allowed the second most fantasy points to tight ends. From 2011 to 2014, Jimmy Graham averaged 137 targets a season. And then last year, tight ends in this New Orleans Saints offense were only targeted 89 times. So I think this year it should be somewhere in the middle of that. So if Cook sees around 100 targets this year in this offense, he's going to be great. Sean Payton knows how to call plays. He knows how to scheme up for tight ends, and Drew Brees knows how to execute them. In this game here, you got a whole bunch of new players for the Texans. You know, they traded for Duke Johnson. They traded for Kenny Stills. They got a new left tackle. So this offense may look a little sloppy in week 1, but they're going to have to put up points because we know the Saints are going to put up points at home. And actually last year, the Saints allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think you can play Will Fuller. I think you can play Kenny Stills, especially in a DFS lineup. I think he's going to be very cheap. Kiki Kute apparently is still going to be out. He's probably going to miss this game, which means Kenny Stills should fall right into that slot receiver spot. Duke Johnson, I'm going to play him. Although the Saints allowed the third fewest fantasy points to running backs last year, I think Duke's going to catch plenty of passes in a PPR league. He's worth it. One guy I drafted in a lot of leagues is Latavius Murray. You look at his stats last year compared to Mark Ingram's stats. They each had around 140 attempts. Ingram had 645 yards, and Murray had 578 yards. So it's just a little bit behind. They each had 6 rushing touchdowns. They each caught, one caught 21 passes, the other one caught 22 passes. They were each targeted 26 times. Mark Ingram had 170 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown to Murray's 140. So he finished with more receiving yards and he finished with more rushing yards, and this was in 4 fewer games as well. But I think with Murray stepping into that workload with this team, this offensive line, this quarterback, This Michael Thomas on the outside, I think Latavius Murray can easily put up the same numbers that Ingram put up. Maybe not the same amount of receiving yards, maybe a little less rushing yards, but as far as touchdowns go, as far as catches go, as far as the involvement in the offense, I think he's going to be there. So he's another guy I drafted in a lot of leagues. I want to play him if I have him. Moving on to our next game, we got the Falcons going up to Minnesota playing the Vikings. You're playing Matt Ryan. He was great last year. I think he was MVP the year before that, sometime around there. The one that sucks in this game, obviously, is Julio Jones. He might be sitting this game out. He wants a new contract. He deserves a new contract. So, hopefully they get it done, because if he sits, that's going to really suck. It would, however, open things up for a lot of the other guys on the team. Obviously, we got Calvin Ridley, second-year wide receiver. He has an opportunity to really take over that wide receiver 2 spot and put Mohamed Sanu clearly in the number 3 spot. And another guy that I spoke a lot about on the tight end preview episode, Austin Hooper. He could be a huge sleeper this year in the Dirk Cutter offense. Last year, calling plays, or in the past 3 years calling plays in Tampa, Cam Brate has the most red zone TDs among tight ends, and that's in the past 3 years with Dirk Cutter as the offense coordinator. He's now in Atlanta. If Julio's not there, not that Julio was a big red zone target guy anyway. Anybody who's been a Julio Jones owner in the past few years knows how frustrating it's been with him in the red zone, but I think Austin Hooper could really flourish under this new offensive scheme. If you have Devontae Freeman, you're probably playing him, although the Vikings did allow the 9th fewest fantasy points to running backs. They allowed the 8th fewest receptions to running backs. So I'd temper your expectations with that one. On the Vikings side of the ball, you're playing Dalvin Cook. The Vikings are pretty hopeful that he can take that next step forward and be the legitimate number 1 running back that they drafted him to be. Stephon Diggs is apparently dealing with a hamstring injury. Not sure if he's going to play. So keep an eye on him. If he does play, you're probably going to have to play him because you probably drafted him, where you did in the 3rd, 4th round if you could. But this Falcons defense was absolutely atrocious last year. They allowed the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so it's a great matchup. You can't really get away from it if he does play. And then Adam Thielen, he's going to play and he's going to be good, so I'm putting him into my lineup if I have him as well. The Los Angeles Rams going out to the Carolina Panthers. This is going to be a fun game, I think. We got Cam. He's dealing with this foot injury that he got. I think it was second preseason game. Hopefully that doesn't, hold him back in any way. McCaffrey's going to be awesome. Gurley, this is going to be a big test for Gurley. A lot of people are very undecided as to whether or not we can expect him to put up RB1 numbers this year. After last year missing time with, missing the last few games and then underperforming in the playoffs, and I think he would agree that he definitely underperformed. But if you got him, you're playing him this week. The Panthers did allow the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs last year, but Todd Gurley's Todd Gurley. You play him. All 3 wide receivers on the Rams, even Kupp coming back from this ACL tear. You're talking Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. You're playing all 3 of them. This is definitely the only team that has 3 legitimate top 24 wide receivers. McCaffrey is an awesome running back, especially PPR formats. You're going to get him into your lineup no matter what. He's probably never going to come out of your lineup. It's the wide receivers on the Panthers that is kind of the mystery right now. And when I was going through trying to pick out my my top 24 wide receivers and my top 12 flexes, I was torn between the Panthers wide receivers and the Lions wide receivers, which we will get to in a little bit. There's been so many reports out of the Panthers camp this year about Curtis Samuels, and he looks like he's really taken a step forward. DJ Moore has kind of flown under the radar. He was pretty good last year too, so they got some talented wide receivers there. It's just going to be fun to see what this offense can become. if you got any one of those 4 wide receivers between the 2 Lions guys and the 2 Panthers guys, I totally can see you playing any one of them. Moving on to the 49ers going down to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers in a league that I waited way too long on to get a quarterback. I just missed out on Phillip Rivers in the 12th round. I was stuck picking. I took Trubisky, and then after a couple days, I was like, you know what, never mind. I'm just going to stream quarterbacks, and so I picked up Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm excited to play him this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense was horrible last year. They gave up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They were in the top 10 as far as fantasy points allowed to running backs and wide receivers as well. I think the 49ers are going to come out and really put a whooping on them. Telvin Coleman, the new addition in this running back group. Matt Breida's there still from last year, and honestly, I'd play either one of them. Kyle Shanahan's offenses just seem to churn out running back fantasy points. They're both well-rounded, versatile running backs. They can do whatever, and I think Shanahan really likes these guys, so I think he's going to use them. And you look at the rest of the team. Obviously, George Kittle is the number one guy there. He's probably going to see the most targets on the team, I would be willing to imagine. And trying to figure out what they're doing here with these wide receivers. They got Dante Pettis, who showed some promise last year. Marquise Goodwin, who was battling injuries throughout the year last year, but the season before that, put up some nice numbers. He's showed himself to be a good deep threat. And then they got guys like Kendrick Bourne, Trent Taylor, and the new rookie Deebo Samuel. They got a whole bunch of young, talented wide receivers. None of them look like legitimate number ones, but in this offense, again, I don't think you really need one because Shanahan just schemes up so well and calls plays so well. The wide receivers on the other side of the ball are really fun too. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin should take a big step forward this year without having to compete with targets or 4 targets with Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries. O.J. Howard coming into the season healthy. I think new head coach Bruce Arians has never had a tight end as talented as him, and I think you're going to see some cool stuff come from him as far as scheming up plays and whatnot. But surprisingly enough, looking back, and if you listen to the RB episode, you might have heard me say this this next little part here. But Ronald Jones, I think, could end up being one of the biggest sleepers this year. And he was drafted as one of the top running backs in the draft last year. A lot of people were super excited about him, and if you go back and look at running backs that have had 1,000-plus total yard seasons under Bruce Arians, it's a pretty good list. From 2009 to 2012, Rashard Mendenhall did it 3 times. 2014, Andre Ellington did it. 2015, David Johnson. 2016, David Johnson again with his 2,000-yard season. Even in 2017, when David Johnson got hurt, Adrian Peterson stepped in 6 games, had 500 yards. So if he had played a full season, he probably would have hit that number too. I'm not saying you should pick him up and start him this week. I'm not saying that he was somebody that you should have spent a high draft pick on. But I think we could see something come out of this. If there's any coach, it seems like that can bring out the best in a versatile running back. A young running back. It may be Bruce Arians. And this matchup ain't bad either. The 49ers last year allowed the 6th most receptions and the 8th most receiving yards to running backs. So I think you could see Ronald Jones catch a couple passes this week. May not be the worst play in PPRs. Maybe a pretty good cheap payout on a DFS league. Moving over to the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals. Like I was saying earlier, these Detroit Lions wide receivers, I can't seem to figure out, whether I like them, whether I'm afraid of them. Who's the number one? Who's going to get the lion's share of those targets? And especially with this new offensive coordinator, I think they're going to distribute the ball as much as they possibly can. But this is a good matchup for them. They got no Patrick Peterson over there for the Cardinals this week. He's out for the first couple weeks, suspension, I believe. And then Kerryon Johnson, you're playing him. He showed to be a awesome running back last year. And the Cardinals last year gave up the most fantasy points to running backs, so you're definitely playing Kerryon Johnson if you drafted him. Got the other running back with the last name of Johnson, David Johnson, on the Cardinals side. You're going to play him as well. You know, he was a top 5 pick for a reason. He's super talented. And frankly, we just don't know what this Cardinals offense is going to look like. I think the only other player you can confidently play is Larry Fitzgerald, just because you know he's going to be involved in whatever this scheme is and whatever plays are called. So I'm playing David Johnson. I'm playing Larry Fitzgerald. I'm kind of staying away from everybody else on this Cardinals offense until we see what it's going to look like and until we see whether or not Cliff Kingsbury's college offense can translate into the NFL. We got the Cincinnati Bengals going up and playing the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson is a beast. You're playing him every week. We got 2 awesome running backs, Chris Carson, Joe Mixon. Last year, Joe Mixon broke the 1,000-yard mark. He caught 78% of his 55 targets, had over 300 receiving yards. The new head coach here with the Bengals spent some time over in L.A. with the Rams, and I'm not saying that Joe Mixon is the next Todd Gurley, but I don't think it's too hard to make that comparison as far as body type goes and ability and explosion. I think put Joe Mixon in a good situation, and I think he turns into one of the top running backs in the league. So we'll see what happens there. A.J. Green's probably going to miss this game. He's got some kind of leg injury, I believe. So, with no A.J. Green, that leaves Tyler Boyd as the number 1 target there. He could end up being one of the biggest steals in the draft this year, somebody that you probably got in the middle rounds that could end up clearly being a top 15, top 16 wide receiver easily if A.J. Green doesn't play the majority of the season. John Ross is an interesting guy. He's going to be running deep routes and whatnot, but I'd kind of stay away from everybody else on this Bengals offense. Going back to the Seahawks, Chris Carson, very excited about him. Last year, he was competing with Mike Davis and Rashard Penny, but now with no Mike Davis, it's just the 2 of them. I don't think they're going to split 50-50 like Pete Carroll has said before. I think it's going to probably be more of a 60-40 type of thing. And I'm excited about Chris Carson. I'm going to wait to see with Rashard Penny. I drafted him in a couple of leagues as well. Excited about. I got him in my in the league that I tried to go 0 RB, and we'll just see how it goes. If he can be a legitimate number 2 running back for me, I'll be plenty happy with that. And now with Doug Baldwin not on the team, Tyler Lockett has become the number 1 receiver. I know they just drafted DK Metcalf, but it's pretty strange, or not that often do you see a rookie wide receiver come in and just step right into a big role in the passing game. So I'm excited about Tyler Lockett this season and this week, especially the Bengals last year. Their offense was terrible. They gave up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, so Russell Wilson should eat them up this week. Heading over to the Giants at the Cowboys, got us an NFC East matchup here. I'm staying away from both quarterbacks. I don't think either of them are good enough to start in your fantasy team. However, both running backs 100% are. We got Saquon coming back, number 1 player in a lot of fantasy leagues, I'm sure. And then Zeke Elliott, he comes back, he signs his contract, and apparently he's going to step right into his normal workload, which is pretty wild to consider that he hasn't, stepped on the field since, I don't know when. It's been a while. Somebody else on the Cowboys I'm excited about, Randall Cobb. Last year, you look at Cole Beasley's numbers, 86 targets, caught 65 passes for 670 yards, had 3 touchdowns. I think Randall Cobb can easily do that. I think he can do that and more, especially if Amari Cooper is going to be limited with this plantar fasciitis thing he's got going on. I'm excited about Randall Cobb, man. I might put him into another DFS lineup as well. If you haven't noticed, I'm kind of going with the fill up my lineup with as many of the cheap upside guys, and then I try and go for maybe 1 or 2 of the studs that have a good matchup for my DFS strategy. Someone like Evan Ingram, who, he should be the focal point of this passing attack for the Giants, especially with Golden Tate suspended for the first 4 games. I don't think Sterling Shepard is a number 1 receiver. They got a guy there by the name of Benny Fowler. If you watched any of the preseason stuff, he did see quite a few red zone targets. He was somebody that played with Peyton over in Denver, and Peyton had. I remember watching a game. He was, after a win, he was getting interviewed on the field, and he was talking about Benny Fowler and how people should keep him in their minds as far as this football game goes here. And with our last game of the week. Should be another bloodbath in favor of the Philadelphia Eagles. We got the Redskins going to play the Eagles. I'm not playing any Redskins, not one of them. I don't care who's starting at quarterback, whether it's Keenum or Haskins. I'm not playing any of them. The best wide receiver they have on the team right now, in my opinion, is Paul Richardson, who I think he's not a number 1 wide receiver. The one guy that probably has the most chatter about him going into this game is Darius Geis. I heard on, I think it was through the CBS, that Adrian Peterson may be a healthy scratch in this game, which is, obviously a good sign for Darius Geis. So if you're a Darius Geis owner and, you drafted him maybe higher than you should have, he's maybe not the worst play in the of this week here. And if they do find themselves in a game script where they're down and they need to throw the ball, Darius Geis, he's got himself a good matchup as far as catching the ball out of the backfield. The Eagles allowed the 2nd most receptions and the 6th most receiving yards to running backs last year. So Darius Geis could catch some passes this week. Maybe he's more worth playing in a PPR than in a standard league. You look at the Eagles; they are just absolutely loaded with talent. Carson Wentz, you're playing. Alshon Jeffrey, he crept up on the injury report, I believe, with a hamstring injury, but you're probably going to play him too. And then obviously one of the big 3 tight ends, Zach Ertz, you're playing him. It's you got to make that decision about Deshaun Jackson and guys like Jordan Howard and who I don't know what this Eagles backfield is going to look like. That's why they were one of the backfields I avoided on draft day. Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Darren Sproles, Corey Clement. I know they cut Josh Adams, but still 4 guys that I know they like, 4 guys that I know they're going to get the ball to throughout every game. So this ball is going to get spread around with all these running backs. I'm staying away from them until one of them emerges as the clear-cut number 1, or unfortunately, until one of them gets hurt, which it's football. We all know it's going to happen. So that does it for the part 2 Week 1 preview episode of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you check us out next week. We're gonna have our Adam's gonna do our DFS lineup of the week. Chris is gonna be back with his 3-team parlay of the week. Hopefully next week my work schedule won't make me have to record on Friday night. Hopefully I'll be able to get this out to you guys by Friday next week. So thanks for tuning in, and as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.